The purpose of this module is to build an interactive application. We are going to build an application that converts miles distance into kilometers and reciprocally converts kilometers distance into miles. If I set the miles field with a value 12.8, for example, I can convert this value to kilometers by clicking on the button converts mile to kilometers, and the value is displayed in the field kilometers, and the value is 20.6. I can make a conversion from kilometers distance to miles. For that, I set the field kilometers with a value 23.7 and convert this value to miles by clicking on the button convert kilometers to miles. The first step of this module is to create a new project. We begin by launching Android Studio. We close this window and the following screen appears. We can close open projects by selecting File menu and close project item, and then the Welcome to Android Studio screen appears. We select Start a new Android Studio project item to create a new project. The name of the project is Convert miles to kilometers, and then we click on Next. In the following screen, we keep the default value. The application is developed for phone and tablet. We click on Next. Here we have the choice between a blank activity, an empty activity, and other activities. We select an empty activity, just like the previous project, and click on Next. Here we keep the default value for the name of the activity, for the name of the layout, and click on Finish. The project is created and the following screen appears. In the following steps, we will focus on the design of the user interface. To build the user interface, we select the res directory, then the layout directory, and we select the activity main file by double-clicking on this file, and the following screen is displayed. We remove the text view component, which is located at the top left corner of the screen, by selecting the component and pressing the delete key of the keyboard. Then, from the widgets category of the palette, we select large text and put this component of the screen. We change the text of the component. The default value is large text, and the new value is miles. From the text field category, we select a plain text component and put it on the screen near the previous component. We can change the properties of this component. For example, we can change the ID property. The default value is edit text, and we can change this value to edit text miles. We can change also the width property. We set this value to 100 dp, and we can see that the width of the component has changed on the screen. We put on the screen another large text component and another plain text component to enter the kilometers distance. change the text to kilometers. Then we put plain text. We change the ID of this component to edit text kilometers, and we change the width of this component to 100 dp. Now we have on the screen two text view component and two edit text component. Finally, we place two buttons on the layout of the screen. One button to convert miles distance into kilometers, and the other button to convert kilometers distance into miles. Place first button on the layout, and I change some properties of the button. I change the ID property and the text property. The new value of the ID property is button conv miles to kilometers, and the text property is convert miles to kilometers. I place a second button on the layout under the first button, and change the ID property and the text property. The new value of the ID property is button conv kilometers to miles, and the text property is convert kilometers to miles. Now the build of the user interface is finished. In the following steps of the module, we will focus on the source code of the application, and we are going to modify the main activity file. This file contains the definition of the main activity class, and in this class we find the definition of the onCreate function. The onCreate function is called when the activity is created. In the onCreated function, we define a button variable. This variable is called, for example, button conv miles to kilometers, and we use this variable to get a reference to the button component of the user interface. To get this reference, we use a function which is called find view by ID. This function takes one parameter, and the parameter is the ID of the button component of the user interface. We want to get a reference to the button which allows to convert miles to kilometers distance. So we use the ID button conv miles to kilometers. We cast the result to button, and then we import the package where the class button is defined. If the button is to respond to a click event, it must register the onClick listener event listener and implements the corresponding onClick callback method. To do that, we call the method set onClick listener, which is defined in the button class. This method takes one parameter. The parameter is onClick listener object, and the onClick listener class overrides the onClick method. In the onClick callback method, we cut the instructions that allow to convert the miles distance into kilometers. To do this conversion, first we have to get a reference to the edit text miles component and the edit text kilometers component. These two components were placed on the layout of the user interface. First, we declare an edit text variable. For example, we name this variable text box miles, and we use this variable to get a reference to the edit text miles component of the user interface by using the function findUById. This function takes one parameter, and the parameter is the ID on the edit text miles component of the user interface. We cast the result of the function in edit text, and we import the package where the function, the class edit text is defined. We write the same instruction for the text box kilometers. We can copy paste this instruction. We name this variable text box kilometer, and we get a reference to the edit text kilometers component by using the findViewById function. The next step is to convert the value we get in the edit text miles from string to double. To do that, we call the getText function, which is defined in the edit text class. We apply the function to string to the expression returned by the getText function. This expression returns a string expression, and we convert this string expression to a double expression by using the function valueOf, which is defined in the double class. The result of this function is stored in a double variable. For example, we call this variable vmiles. The miles value, which is contained in the vmiles variable, is converted into kilometers distance. To do this conversion, we define the vkilometers variable. This variable is equal to vmiles divided by 0.62137. Then the kilometers distance is displayed in the edit text kilometers component of the user interface. Before to display this value in the user interface, we have to format this value because we want to keep only 2 digits after the decimal point of the value. To do that, we define the formatVal variable. Then we call the format function to format the value. We format the vkilometers variable from double value to string value with just 2 digits after the decimal point. And then we call the setText method to the text box kilometer variable. Then the value is formatted and displayed in the text box kilometer component. At this point, the source code that converts miles distance into kilometers is completed. Now we have to write the code that converts kilometers distance into miles. To do this conversion, we can do a copy-paste of this part of code. and change some instructions. Here we change the name of the variable. The new name is button conv kilometers to miles. This variable is used to get a reference to the button component of the user interface. We change the name of the variable in the next instruction. Then here we keep the two instructions. We change here the name of the variable from the miles to the kilometers. The name of the text box is changed. Then we change the name of this variable. The vmiles variable is equal to the kilometers multiplied by 0.62137. Then we format the value to display in the text box miles. Then the vmiles value is formatted. Now we test the application on the Android virtual device emulator. To launch the application on the Android virtual device, we click on the green triangle, which is located at the top of the window. Here we select the Nexus 6 emulator, and the application is launched on the virtual device. We can set the miles field with a value, for example 12.6, and click on the Convert Miles to Kilometers button, and the value is displayed in the kilometers field. We can do also conversion from kilometers to miles. Can set the kilometers field with a value 21.5 and converts kilometers to miles, and the value is displayed in the miles field.